Values answer the question, what's it feel like to work in your company? And I think that if we don't, as leaders, embody the values that we articulate, we've lost all credibility. And I think that that's a very important aspect of a curative culture, is to embody and embrace the values that you articulate.
Revolution of common sense.
Revolution of common sense.
A revolution of common sense.
Truth was once common sense, but today, truth is uncommon. Explore biblical truths around faith, business, and politics with Peter Demas. Uncommon sense in current times.
Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. Today I'm with Doug Shaw. He is the president and CEO of Douglas Shaw and Associates. It is a fundraising and communications firm that partners primarily with nonprofit and faith-based organizations. Over the past 3 decades, he's advised ministries, charities around the world on donor development, organizational culture. But recently he is the author of Curative Culture, Stepping Away from a Toxic Workplace, where he argues that healthy organizations don't just avoid harm, they actively help people heal. In this book, Shaw blends lessons from business leadership and his own Christian faith to propose what he calls a curative model of servant leadership built on dignity, empathy, and values-driven accountability. So thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Peter.
So I've read a lot of articles about it. I actually just got back from vacation, got back this morning, went through your book very quickly, but I can't say I did a deep dive word for word in your book, but I went through it very quickly on it after kind of reading some stuff. And so when I read it, and I want to make certain I don't put words in your mouth here, but the curative culture kind of assumes that people are good and simply are wounded by toxic systems. So what does this mean in practice? Because this is where I'm, because I'll be honest, I've been in the business world for a long time. We were defined toxic. We are now in best workplaces for 7 years, but I didn't do it the way that you said. Actually, I went a different approach. So that's why I'm real curious to see how this plays out in our talk today. Yeah. So how do you put this in practice? How do you look at curative culture in practice?
Well, I think first of all, I think we all know what toxic is. I mean, everyone I've ever talked to, they never have a question about the definition of a toxic environment at work. People all have their own definitions, but they all know the sense of being disappointed, devalued, that kind of thing. So I found myself trying to come up with a one-word antonym for toxic. And as I began looking and thinking and researching and praying and trying to figure out, okay, what is something that can be an antidote? I started looking at the word curative. I had a long list of words, and I really wanted to have something that I really felt would represent what I was trying to communicate. So I looked at the word curative, which comes from the Latin curare, which means to cure or heal. Now, what this presupposes is that all of us have some need of healing, or that we all bring baggage. And when you ask about how this is lived out, it's really about meeting people where they are when they come into the workplace.
But when you're looking at a large organization, that's almost impossible. And the reason why I say that is because I don't know where everybody is. They're not going to tell me where everybody is. So one of the things that we did was we brought in chaplains. The chaplains engage with our employees. They have that. But for me, I need to ensure that the job gets done, because if they don't do their job, it impacts everybody else. Absolutely. So how do you align those two of saying, hey, this is where it is, but you know what, you come in with a different set of wounds than, say, somebody else that comes in with a different set of wounds. How do I try to justify that and make it into where I can't even do my job because I'm too busy trying to play doctor?
Well, that's one thing curative culture is not, is trying to be a therapist or a doctor. The concept is really one of influencing those that you are in direct communication with. So I think it can work with any size company. In a large company, you can only interact with a certain number of people. That's also true in a small company, if you really think about it. Small meaning a few hundred people or even less. You have a circle of people that you as a leader are interacting with. And a curative culture is really more about, are you creating a place where there's hope? I think that's something that so many people encounter in their work is it's a drudgery. And often they're being played off against someone. I know in my book I do talk about several scenarios I was in personally that were very toxic. I was played off. I was encouraged to lie to clients. I've been in all kinds of situations where I was abused verbally. Most of the people were in the company. There was high intensity at all times where people were really just used. By curative, I'm talking about, and I'm talking about more of a healing culture, I'm talking about understanding that we're all human beings first. And from my perspective, I'm theologically trained. I come at it from a perspective of the Imago Dei, the image of God. And when I look at people, as in Genesis, it talks about how we are all made in his image. And if I look at people as really being made in his image, and then I see them not behaving as their best selves, I have to reconcile that somehow. Because as we know, conflict is everywhere, in the workplace and outside of the workplace. But in the workplace specifically, when I encounter someone who's coming from a very different perspective, or they've really got a burr under their blanket, and they're not having a good day, they're not being their best selves, those are things that we encounter and we have to be able to deal with as leaders. And I have to remember, first and foremost, that they are made in God's image. And that is not always easy, especially if I don't like somebody.
Right. That's true.
Well, those are the challenges I think leaders face a lot. Is if there's people or departments even within your company that you don't really care for, how do you look at them in a way that's positive and in a way that's curing and healing, so that you can get to the work that you're there for, and impact the bottom line.
Okay, but in that particular situation, and if I'm looking at it that's more data driven, and I would think the opposite of curative culture would be a Six Sigma approach, like Jack Welch, but it's very data driven on that. But if I'm looking at it data driven, my personality, my personal feelings doesn't matter. And I can give you an example. There are several employees that I have that I really don't like, but the customers love them. Like they actually really annoy me. And I actually will almost avoid them because it's just like it's just really hard for me to be around them. But customers love them. When they mess up, we allow for them to have a greater experience, because again, the data reflects that customers want them. They like having them there, and it doesn't matter what Peter wants; it matters what they want. But at the same time, it's data driven. So if we're looking at data driven culture as opposed to more of this kind of a motive-driven culture, does that not also? How do you reconcile that? Because if I looked at them, as a person or whatever, then I'm putting myself into a toxic environment by allowing them to be around me a whole lot.
Well, you raise a really good point. First and foremost, I do think a curative culture is also data-driven. You have to be profitable. There is absolutely no getting around that. That's why you're in business. That's why you exist. You measure everything. In my business at Douglas Shaw and Associates, we say we measure everything that wiggles. So data-driven is very critical. I don't think they're opposites. I think you can be data-driven and still be very much in a curative environment. Now, when you bring up the point about producers, people that customers really like. I tell a story in my book, Curative Culture, about two employees and how one of them is really acting out and not treating their reports well. It's a true story. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. But I talk about it because in this one instance, this employee, Linda, she says, they're there to make me look good. And, Linda is just she's got a very bad attitude towards the people that report to her. And the CEO, he talks to Linda and he says, do I treat you this way? Do I treat you as though you're here to make me look good? Linda has to pause, and she does, and she thinks about it. And he says, okay, I'm going to spend some time with you, and I'm going to show you how a leader needs to lead. And Linda went on and became a very high-level executive and did very well, juxtaposed to Troy. Troy was someone who came in, first of all, said, I don't have a problem. They have a problem. My employees, they're not telling you the truth when they're complaining about me. And besides that, you don't need to tell me what to do because I already know it. I learned that years ago. And
I've never had those.
Yeah, right. I know. You know what? Nobody knows where Troy is today. Linda really excelled because she cared enough to listen and to take advantage of the opportunity that her leader was giving her by saying, I'm going to show you what leadership is and how to interact with people. Now, I don't think they're in opposition. I don't think, because the bottom line is still absolutely critical. Excellence is absolutely critical in a curative culture.
Well, I mean, yeah, especially if you're going to say it's Christian, because excellence is a Christian value. So, and then I guess then that's where, so I look at some of there was a list of CEOs that you kind of had kind of lumped together. There was Howard Schultz, Herb Kelleher, Batchelder with Popeyes, Tony Shea, Greenleaf with AT&T. I think Robert Greenleaf. Yeah. And you had a list of those, but I look at Schultz. Schultz has had this thought process and idea, but in reality is his employees hated him so much and it became such a problem. They recently unionized. They have had multiple battles. Herb Kelleher didn't last. As soon as he left, and they faced the challenges of COVID, all that went out the window. Greenleaf, AT&T, same thing went out the window. Tony Shea, his desire for always happiness ended up with him having a drug addiction and abuse and died under suspicious circumstances in a fire. The only one that seems to kind of like rise above out of all the examples you gave was Batchelder with Popeyes, and she was brutal on her franchisees. Now, again, I agree with her. I actually liked her approach. But at the same time, it seems like you take this group and as a whole, as, hey, this is an example of curative culture. And I'm like, as a whole, this doesn't seem to really withstand the pressures of time and pressures of just circumstances in a lot of these cases. How do you deal with that issue? Because it seems like those didn't seem like to be the best examples, and I'm not trying to second guess the choices you made, but it just seems like it was kind of hard in that area.
Well, I didn't really use them as an example of a curative culture. In my writing, I was talking really about them embracing a servant leadership concept, which I do utilize in a curative culture situation. But what you're describing, they're all people with clay feet, every one of them. I know it. I am a person as well with clay feet. I'm not perfect at what I do. What I hear you talking about is what's the lasting impact of a curative culture. And a curative culture, to me, is a culture where, in my company, for example, is 30 years old. We have a 9.5-year average employee retention rate compared to 3.9 years on a national average, according to the U.S. Department of Labor and Statistics. So when you take a look at that, we have, I can't tell you how many right now are coming up on their 20th anniversaries in a 30-plus-year-old company. They're there because they have the understanding of why they're there. They have a sense of purpose and hope. But they also have a sense of, if something goes haywire, if we start turning on each other in the company, one department is pitted against another or one division against another, someone's going to intervene. There's fairness in a curative culture. There's a sense of justice. It's not going to go on for very long. Now, you spoke earlier about data being data driven and producers, people that the customers really like, but they may be hard to get along with. I had to encounter that very thing in my own company. And several years ago, I had two highly placed people in my company that customers really liked, and they were high producers, but they were absolutely toxic. One of them would just tear people down continually to elevate himself. Another person would just gossip so much that no one could trust him. On the other hand, customers really liked him. Thankfully, I had a really great consultant come to me, and he said, "You know, Doug, I'd fire a high producer just as quickly as I would one who wasn't producing." He said, "In fact, if you don't do something about these two people, people are going to start to think you believe that what they're doing is okay." And it wasn't okay. I was shocked that I had come to that realization that if I've got people acting out in such a way that it's causing destruction amongst other people, even though they're high producers, if they're acting out, I have to do something about it. And that's one thing a leader has to confront. I did. Both of them ended up leaving in different ways. One very peacefully and went on to another great career. Another left it was a very upsetting circumstances. But they chose how they left, to be honest with you. But I'll have to tell you, the good thing about that is with both of them gone, the organization flourished. Other people were able to rise, and it's the same thing. The consultant said to me, "You know what? Every time I go through this exercise, the CEOs say, 'Why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I get rid of those high producers that were causing the problem?'" Right. So I really think there's a lot of value in having that experience and being able to share that perspective.
So one of the things that I find interesting, and I was trying to look it up, and I'm curious to know your view on this, because I read it, and I'm going to paraphrase terribly,
Okay.
but Elon Musk sent out an email, and in that email he said, "When I give direction, you have three things. One, I could be wrong, so tell me I'm wrong. Number two, follow it. Number three, find another job." And it's basically, he's like, "Look, you're either going to do it or you're going to tell me why you're wrong." On some level, the opening the door to say, "Hey, you're wrong," is part of the curative culture. But there is a pretty hardline approach, which is, if you agree with me, then it's direction. If you don't agree with me, you have an opportunity. How do you look at that? Like, do you think that, and Elon Musk is known for being a very hard person to work for because he demands so much, but he's highly successful as well. Obviously, he's the wealthiest man by billions of dollars. So how do you look at that in that particular email? Does that seem to kind of fit more toward the curative culture or more toward toxic culture? Because he seems to apply both in that email.
I don't measure success necessarily by being the richest man in the world.
Correct.
I will say that I'm sure there's been some trade-offs for that to take place. I will say that as I take a look at how to deal with people who I give directives to, I expect my directives to be followed. In a curative culture, it is not a lay down, you're a doormat, not in any way, shape, or form. If my directives aren't carried out, I get rather hot under the collar. Now, what do I do about it? That's part of it. And I have a private conversation with those that need to have a little fire lit, and I'm known for being rather demanding myself. On the other hand, if someone has something happen in their life, and as we all do, how do I respond to that? I can tell you, I worked in a situation where my father passed away unexpectedly. And this was back in 1986. My dad died at 68 years old of a massive heart attack. My boss said, "I don't care if your dad died. You come to work the next day. We got a client coming in, and I want you to analyze these television stations, and I want you to tell me which ones are producing at the highest level." I won't do that. Now, that stayed with me a long time and still with me. I was grieving. I was in the depths of despair.
Right.
And this person didn't give a rip. Now, to me, someone needs bereavement time, you give it to them. There's others who can step
Right.
in or do the work myself. It's part of, I think there's sometimes a high wall between work and humanity. And I think curative culture is just saying, let's remember the humanity. Let's remember the faith that we say we are embracing. The Imago Dei is critical. If I look at people, even people I don't like, even people who are performing poorly, even if they're not following my directive, I still have to look at them and say, okay, now how do I really want them to succeed? That's one thing a curative culture asks, is do I really want that person to succeed? And then how can I help them succeed? Now, I can't make them succeed. I can't be their therapist or their doctor. But I do want to create opportunity that they can then say, you know what, at least I've had the opportunity to make a course correction. I recently saw a LinkedIn post by Kurt Swindoll in which he was talking about working for his mom. And he said, I had to come to a place where when I disagreed with my mom, that I had to decide, am I going to commit or am I going to leave? And that's something we all have to do about our jobs.
Right.
And so when Elon Musk gives a directive, people are going to have to ask, am I going to commit or am I going to leave? And that's a choice we all have. I look at, in a curative culture situation, I look at employees as all volunteers. If they're any good, and I like to hire good people, if they're any good, really, they can find jobs elsewhere. And so I have to look at them as though they don't have to be there. Now, on the other hand, does that mean I don't require excellence? Not at all. I do require excellence. I think they actually call me Eagle Eye in my office because I'm always looking at what's going on. I saw Herb Kelleher on an airplane one time. He was sitting in the very back of the airplane. He was sitting back by the restrooms on a Southwest flight. And the flight attendant was up there going through her pre-flight rituals and so forth. And she forgot to talk about their rewards program. And boy, I'll tell you, she came back on, she goes, up. And folks, we have Herb Kelleher today in the back of the plane, and he's reminded me that I forgot to tell you. And then always watching. And I think excellence is a high standard. We have to have excellence in our workplace. So it's not one versus another. It's excellence in an environment of caring.
You know, and I agree with you. And I think that's where, when I made the determination, because I got saved about a year after that survey came out being toxic. And when I started seeing employees, I took care of employees the way I took care of equipment. Like, you know, you have to take care of your equipment in order for it to last longer. But I started looking at people in the body, mind, heart, and spirit. Like they were a whole person, and we started allowing for certain things. We started, and there were a lot that we, you know, I can look back and be ashamed at some of the ways I treated people, and
Me too.
so I understand that. I understand that difference. But I will tell you what ended up happening next was then it moved to almost an entitlement culture. And it created, our customer complaints started going up. We started having, and then it was trying to balance. That pendulum swung too far in one direction. Is there not a fear of, hey, we're going to put this curative culture in place that then, because, and part of it is I work with a lot of Gen Z and millennials, and at that time was more millennials than Gen Zs. And it's it's toxic if I don't get what I want. You know, and or if you don't love me, if you're not approval, which obviously is not Christian based in either fashion. So how do you prevent it from going to that other extreme? Just the same way you want to prevent it from going to the jerk that you worked for with, you know, when your dad died. Yeah. How do you? Because it's the extremes that seem to be the problem in our culture. Yeah. How do you prevent it and keep it in the middle?
Okay, I think that one of the bigger things that I've found as a CEO, I'm working on the company more than in the company. And by working on the company, that means and particularly when it comes to culture, that is a significant part of my role. Well, who was it? Peter Drucker that said, culture eats strategy for lunch?
Yes.
something
Yeah.
like that. I think it was
Yeah, it
him.
is. Yeah.
Yep. And recently, within the last couple of years anyway, Kelly Ortberg, who is the CEO of Boeing, who has had their own issues, as we all know,
Yeah.
and I do reference that. I did send him a copy of my book, by the way. I don't know that he's ever read it. But Kelly Ortberg said, we have a culture problem. In a curative culture, so much of what I end up doing is focusing on what is the tone of the body. Now, that's a phrase Max Dupree uses, and Max Dupree was a Fortune 25 CEO of Herman Miller Corporation, and also one of my mentors. He talked about the tone of the body, and to me, that statement, that's I'm always working on the company, working on what is the health of the organization. And yes, there can be excessives where people will go way one direction and say, okay, now I'm going to define reality for myself and for the company. Guess what? That doesn't happen. A curative culture does not imply that people get to define their own reality. In fact, that's one of the things I really believe about leaders, and that does come from Max Dupree, is leaders owe employees two things. They owe them reality, and they owe them thank you. And I have to say, reality has to rule. And in a curative culture, if you're not getting your job done, guess what? You're going to go into course correction. And if you're in course correction and you don't do well, you're not going to be there. We can't guarantee how people are going to behave. What we can do is answer some of the questions people have when they come to work. Like, am I safe? Safe doesn't imply job security, but is it an environment where I actually have an opportunity to succeed? Can I trust you? Are you a person of your word? Do you have integrity? Those are things that people are looking for in a work experience. They want to know that when things go awry, I know they're going to fix this thing. And the fact is, if I'm awry, they're going to fix me, or maybe I'm going to be called on to help fix the situation itself. So in a curative culture, we're there in a sense to really give each other the opportunity to course correct and to be very highly productive.
So when I think back on our experience, because it sounds like it sounds like I'm going to say what you agree, but like I look at Joe Clark and how he turned around East Side High back in the New Jersey back in, I think it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, I got to the honor of listening to Joe Clark speak, and he was unreal. But one of the things that he said, and I love, is he said, discipline is not the enemy of enthusiasm. And when we changed it to, okay, this is where we are, but we can't get rid of the discipline side of what we did. And we moved it to which is, because it seems like people want discipline. Everyone wants everyone else to be disciplined, but not themselves. That's always, in every one of our surveys, that's always, you're not doing enough about them, but you do too much to me. It's hilarious how it always falls out. But children, for example, need the discipline in their lives. God loves us by disciplining us. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot that seems to be in there. Discipline seems to be one of the foundational principles of curative culture. Am I right in saying that based off our conversation? It seems to be right.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things we owe employees in a curative culture is we owe clearly articulated values. The book Curative Culture is largely about values. That's largely what it's talking about. Honesty, integrity. It's about civility. Those are all characteristics that we need to have in our human interactions with each other. Why? Because we're trying to get something done in the world. Whether you're making a product or you're providing a service, if you're not doing it excellent, somebody else is going to, and you're going to be out of business.
Right.
That's a hard reality. And guess what? We owe people reality. So we've got to be excellent. There's no question about it. And rules really are guide rails, if you will, or guardrails that help you. And policies are important and they need to be followed. Now, but policy doesn't mean that you forget about humanity.
Right.
I think that's what I'm really going for in curative culture, is talking about the humanity involved in the process of working. The Bible is all about relationships. It's all about relationships, our relationship to God, our relationship to each other. Our workplace, if we are people of faith, we want to carry that in. I don't want to just say, oh, guess what? I'm going to treat you like dirt, but I'm going to have a passage of scripture on the bottom of the memo.
Right. I understand that.
I owe you more than that. If you come to work for me, I owe you something. You can say, you know what? That guy's worth following. Because that's another question people have is, am I safe? Do I respect them? Can I trust them? Those are key phrases, key questions people have.
So you know what's fascinating? My wife has as part of her job, she's founded a company called F1, which stands for Foundations First, and she says our foundations are based on our purpose, our values, our mission. But what she finds when she counsels other businesses on this is that what she finds is that they might have their mission statement, they might have their values, they might have that stuff, but it's not really who they are. They just did it for whatever the purpose was. And when they're under moments of tension, under moments of stress, they don't fall back on those values. They fall back on whatever it is that's happened. And I think we could see that with Cracker Barrel recently. Yes. Cracker Barrel had a nice, simple purpose statement, mission statement. They underwent so much criticism and stress in the 90s. They were the only organization that was investigated by the Department of Justice for race discrimination, yet their sales still increased. They still had that because they did what they said they were going to do, which is to serve people. But now recently we see everything just fall apart, where they didn't fall back to their values. So do you see that in curative culture where people might say they have values, but they don't live it out? Like the businesses that you reference, have they, where they might have said the right thing, integrity being that, but they tell you to lie. That seems to be more of is that more of a problem, or is that just situational as well?
Well, I have to say that I think, first of all, putting your values out there is a critical aspect of having a curative culture or any really good company. I really think you've got to be able to tell people what you stand for. I believe I have seen I've done a study of values of other companies, and there are a lot of them don't list any kind of values. They list their mission and their vision, but they don't list their values. But a mission and a vision, they answer a different question than values. Mission and vision say, what do you do for a living? Values said, what is your purpose? What do you care about? And so in looking at values, and first of all, being very thoughtful in creating the values for your company, now you have to ask the question, am I going to really live by them?
Right.
Because I'm going to be measured by them. It's a risky venture. To put your values out there, that says, here's who I say I am. Now you measure me. Values answer the question, what's it feel like to work in your company? And I think that if we don't, as leaders, embody the values that we articulate, we've lost all credibility. And I think that that's a very important aspect of a curative culture, is to embody and embrace the values that you articulate.
Our values are, accountability, consistency, integrity, discipline, humility, undeterred, and grit. And what was funny to me is our general manager started getting upset when the employees were using it back against them. And I'm like, no, that's actually success. Like when the employees are now understanding where we're failing at it, that's when you know that you're being successful now at it. And no, they were using it back against us incorrectly, which was even better because we were doing it right and they didn't understand it. So that was a whole nother level that we had to teach.
Yeah.
But that's when we started seeing that success. So I agree with you completely on that piece of it. So we're at the end. We're probably a little past time, but I've enjoyed this conversation with you on it. I guess if if you had one piece of advice for people out there that are in business or that are having it, that you could say, start here. This is the first thing you have to do. What would you say is the first thing they need to do to start working to Curative Culture outside of buying your book?
Well, I do recommend that, but I would say really creating thoughtful values, really working on those values, and not only articulating, for example, one of our values is profitability. Profitability so that we can exist. In my company at Douglas Shaw and Associates, we exist to help nonprofits raise money to impact the world. And it's with the gospel message. Now, we can't do that if we're not profitable. We have to be profitable. So that's a value. Servant leadership in every aspect, not only towards our customers, but also towards our staff. So creating values is a great place to start, but be thoughtful about it. We created our values that we currently have over 20 some years ago, and we always challenge ourselves, do we need to change those? Have those values shifted? And you know what? They have not shifted. But I'm willing to change the values if indeed there's a reason to do it. I have not found a reason yet. The harder part is not articulating them, though. It's living them. That's the big challenge.
You're absolutely correct. Again, I'm kind of helping my wife plug her business here a little bit, because what she maintains and says is that you can't necessarily do it internal. You need to have somebody external to come to help you to see if you live out those values or not. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that it needs to be external the help as opposed to like an external facilitation as opposed to internal? Because I may think I live out my values, but the people below me may not live out those values, and our company isn't doing so. Yeah. So do you think that's so determining whether you live out those values or not, do you think that is strictly an internal process, or do you think it's a hybrid with external as well?
Oh, definitely hybrid. I have an executive team, and I actually have a non-employee on my executive team. In fact, that non-employee's worked for me for many years. And the reason I like her there is because she brings an outside perspective. She works for several other companies. And she can always bring to us an exterior view that says, okay, here's how you're comparing, but also here's what you're doing really well. And one of the things she tells me is that we're always using our values as the measuring stick. I can't tell you how many times in a day or in a week, Peter, that I say, you know what? If we're going to follow our values, we've got to make this choice over here. Or we have to use our values to inform what we're going to do in a specific situation with a customer. I've had customers that want us to lie for them. I've had customers that and I largely work with Christian organizations, but I'm just telling you that we are all fallen people.
Right.
But it's those values give us the clear light we need to walk in. That's where I say that's the good starting point.
Well, I appreciate it. Again, I love this conversation. To buy your book, I know you can get it on Amazon. Where else can they get about it? How can they find out more about Douglas Shaw and Associates? How do they find out about this?
Well, thank you for asking. DougShawPerspective.com is a great place to find me and my books. Also LinkedIn. I am quite active on LinkedIn. You can find a book on Amazon, and Barnes & Noble is carrying it. I will say every single person that's looked at the cover has winced a little bit and said, oh yeah, I get it. And it's right there.
Yeah, I left mine down in my office. It's downstairs below. But yes, yeah, it
looks like something stuck to your shoe. That's really what it's about. And that's what a toxic culture feels like. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Peter.
Well, thank you so much. And you have a blessed day and continue doing the work you're doing.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.